Hi, I'm Rachel Thompson, and this is the story of how my former students learned that sometimes the best lessons come long after graduation. For 15 years, I ran a small coffee shop while secretly building a real estate empire worth billions. But let me start from the beginning. I used to be a high school economics teacher at Preston Academy, one of the most prestigious private schools in the city. For 20 years, I taught hundreds of privileged students about business, markets, and investments. Some listened. Most just waited to inherit their family fortunes. The irony? While teaching others about wealth building, I was quietly amassing my own fortune. Every penny of my teacher's salary went into buying distressed properties during the 2008 financial crisis. By the time I retired from teaching in 2010, I owned 30 commercial buildings through my company, Thompson Holdings. But instead of retiring to a beach somewhere, I opened a small coffee shop, The Daily Grind, in one of my buildings. Why? Because I learned long ago that the best way to understand a market is to be in the trenches. Plus, I loved making coffee and talking to people. My former students would occasionally stop by, now wearing expensive suits and carrying designer briefcases. They'd order complicated drinks and leave minimal tips, often with a mixture of pity and condescension in their eyes. "Still making coffee, Mrs. T," they'd say. "You should have invested wisely like you taught us." If they only knew that they were paying rent in buildings I owned. Among my regular customers were 3 former students who'd become particularly successful and insufferable. Michael Chen was now CEO of a tech startup, Sarah Williams ran a marketing agency, and David Cooper had just made partner at his law firm. They'd often hold meetings in my shop, loudly discussing their business dealings while treating me like part of the furniture. "Remember how Mrs. T used to preach about smart investments?" Michael would laugh. "Look how that turned out for her." I'd just smile and wipe down tables, listening as they planned their company's expansions. What they didn't realize was that I owned every building they were considering leasing. The situation came to a head last week. The 3 of them came in, excited about finally finding the perfect building for their company's new shared headquarters, the prestigious Thompson Tower downtown. "We're moving up in the world, Mrs. T," Sarah announced loudly. "No more slumming it in coffee shops. We've got a meeting tomorrow to sign the lease on our new offices." "That's wonderful," I said, serving their usual orders. "The Thompson Tower is a beautiful building." "You know it?" David smirked. "I suppose you've cleaned the windows there too." "Something like that," I murmured, noting the time. 4:30 p.m. In exactly 12 hours, they would arrive for their 8:30 a.m. lease signing, not knowing that their old teacher had a surprise waiting for them. The next morning dawned crisp and clear. I arrived at Thompson Tower at 7:00 a.m., taking a private elevator to the top-floor penthouse office. Instead of my usual coffee shop apron, I wore a Taylor Armani suit, one of many I kept hidden behind my collection of cafe uniforms. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I watched the city wake up. Somewhere down there, my coffee shop was being opened by my capable manager, while I prepared for a very different kind of morning service. At 8:15, my assistant Jennifer, who'd been secretly running Thompson Holdings' day-to-day operations for years, buzzed in. "They're in the lobby, Mrs. Thompson." All 3 of them. "Mr. Chen is apparently complaining about having to meet the stuck-up property owner so early." I smiled. "Send them up at exactly 8:30, and Jennifer? Make sure the security cameras in the elevator are recording. I want to preserve their faces for posterity." At 8:30 sharp, I heard the elevator ding. Their voices drifted down the hallway. "Can you believe this place?" Sarah was saying. "The lease is expensive, but imagine the prestige." I heard the owner's some reclusive billionaire, David added. "Probably some old man, whoa." They rounded the corner and stopped dead. Michael's briefcase actually slipped from his fingers, hitting the marble floor with a thud. "Good morning, class," I said pleasantly from behind my desk. "Please, take a seat. Today's lesson is about assumptions and their costly consequences in business." Mrs. T," Michael stammered. "Actually, it's Mrs. Thompson. Rachel Thompson, owner and CEO of Thompson Holdings. But you knew the first part, you just never connected the dots between your old teacher and the name on your lease agreement." Sarah's perfect makeup couldn't hide her rapidly paling face. But you run a coffee shop." "I do," I nodded. "One of many businesses I own, including this building, the one your marketing agency is currently in, Sarah." and the entire tech park where your startup operates, Michael. Oh, and David, that fancy law office you're so proud of. I bought that building last year. David collapsed into one of the leather chairs. This is impossible. You're a teacher, a barista. I was a teacher, I corrected. One who practiced what she preached about investments and market opportunities. As for the coffee shop, let's just say it's amazing what people will discuss in front of someone they think is just a barista. I pulled out 3 folders. Now about your lease applications. But I wasn't finished with my former students yet, because what they didn't know was that I had one more lesson to teach them, one that would change their lives forever. Before we discuss your lease applications, I said, opening my laptop, let's review some interesting conversations I've overheard in my humble coffee shop over the years. I turned the screen towards them, displaying a detailed document. Michael, remember last month when you were bragging about underpaying your development team? Or Sarah, that marketing campaign you claimed credit for, even though your junior associate Amy did all the work? And David, those billable hours you've been inflating. Their faces went from pale to ashen. Every conversation they'd had in my coffee shop, every unethical business decision they'd discussed so brazenly, thinking I was just part of the furniture, I had documented it all. Mrs. Thompson, Michael began, his voice trembling. We can explain. Oh, I'm sure you can. Just like you explained to your investors that your technology was revolutionary when you knew it was barely functional. I believe you said that right after mocking my poor investment choices last Tuesday. Sarah found her voice. Are you blackmailing us? No, I smiled. I'm teaching you. One final lesson about success, ethics, and the danger of judging people by their appearances. I pulled out new documents. These are your revised lease agreements. The terms are quite favorable, significantly below market rate. They stared at me in confusion. But there are conditions, I continued. First, Michael, you'll implement proper pay scales for your developers. Sarah, Amy will be promoted to creative director with appropriate compensation. David, you'll start a pro bono program at your firm for small businesses. And if we refuse, David asked weakly, then you're welcome to find office space elsewhere. Though it might be difficult, Thompson Holdings owns 60% of the premium commercial real estate in this city. Oh, and these documents about your business practices might find their way to some very interested parties. Michael slumped in his chair. Why? Why offer us anything at all? We've been horrible to you. Because teaching isn't just about lectures and textbooks. Sometimes the most important lessons come from real-world consequences. I stood up and walked to the window. Look at this city. Every building you see represents an opportunity I recognize while others were too busy showing off their MBAs to notice. I turned back to them. You 3 were my brightest students, but somewhere along the way, you forgot the most important lesson I tried to teach. True success isn't about what you have, it's about how you use it. 6 months later, the changes were remarkable. Michael's tech company became known for its excellent work culture. Sarah's agency was winning awards under Amy's creative leadership. David's pro bono program was helping dozens of small businesses thrive. They still come to my coffee shop, but now they actually see me. Sometimes we discuss business. I've become something of a mentor to them, showing them that real estate isn't just about buildings, it's about building communities. Yesterday, I overheard Michael telling a new entrepreneur, success isn't about looking successful. My first mentor taught me that, while serving me coffee and quietly building an empire. As for me, I still work at the daily grind 3 days a week. There's something satisfying about serving coffee to ambitious young executives who think they've got it all figured out. After all, you never know which barista might own the building you're sitting in. The biggest lesson, sometimes the best way to teach success isn't from behind a desk, but from behind a counter. And sometimes the richest people in the room are the ones serving the coffee.